I would like to begin by endorsing today's reports. They represent a concrete political perspective, not just for the building workers, but for workers internationally. My name is Ken Mantell. I'm a former steel fixer and a member of the Socialist Equality Party. Some 35 years ago, when I was working in the building industry, I was a member of the Builders Labourers Federation, which was headed by Norm Gallagher, who was the federal and Victorian state secretary of that union and a member of the Maoist Party in Australia. Builders labourers were at one stage the lowest paid, hardest worked and most exploited sections in the building industry. But in the 20-odd years leading up to its deregistration in the early 1980s, BLF members fought hard to improve their conditions. They took on the major construction companies with militant action, including strikes, stopping concrete pours and other industrial action to win better conditions, site allowances and higher pay. And every time there were wage gains and improved conditions for builders labourers, this would flow on to construction workers and in other industries as well. While Gallagher was considered a militant leader by many workers in and out of the building industry, the gains achieved during that period were won by the courage and determination of the BLF leadership. The election of the Hawke-Keating Labor government in 1983 coincided with the growing world recession. The major construction companies, many of whom were internationally based, demanded that the gains made by building workers and other sections of the working class in the previous period be smashed up. The principled mechanism for this was the Labor ACTU Accord, which was launched at a tripartite summit of government, business and union representatives in the federal parliament. Gallagher, along with the entire trade union leadership, attended this event and endorsed the accord. This social assault was backed by the union bureaucrats, including the competing Stalinist groupings, the Maoists, the Moscow Liners and the Communist Party of Australia that headed the different unions. All of them backed Labor government and employer claims that the accord would make Australian industry more profitable and internationally competitive. As Cheryl has explained, Gallagher's attendance at the tripartite summit and had an enormous impact on workers. It completely disarmed the Builders Labourers Federation membership, rendering them incapable of defending the gains they had made and stopping the complete destruction of the union that they had worked to build. It also had a massive impact on disciplining every other union, because if the BLF could be pushed around and deregistered, what hope did others have? I started reading the Workers' News, the socialist newspaper published by the Socialist Labour League, the forerunner of the Socialist Equality Party, in 1981. For the first time in my life, everything started to fall into place. And so when Gallagher signed a code of conduct in 1984, which meant imposing the Master Builders Association's demands, it was no shock to me. The Socialist Labour League's analysis had already explained to me that Gallagher's support for the Accord and the ACTU Code of Conduct was part and parcel of the national defence of Australian capitalism. Gallagher's differences with other sections of the trade union bureaucracy, including the Stalinist leaders of the BWIU, were only tactical. The prime concern of all sections of the union apparatus was not to defend the working conditions, wages and jobs of their members, but the profits of Australian capitalism. The deregistration of the BLF back then and the Albanese's Labor government administration and quasi-dictatorial control of the CFMEU today makes clear that these attacks could not be fought with militant trade unionism, that what was and is needed is a socialist and internationalist program and perspective, one that is independent of the trade union bureaucracy. The crucial lessons of the deregistration of the BLF in the 1980s was found in the political struggle and revolutionary socialist program, which included the nationalisation of the building industry, the banks and financial institutions under workers' control called for by the Socialist Labour League. This perspective won strong support, even though deregistration of the BLF had been bureaucratically imposed by 1989 and builders' labourers had been forced to join the BWIU. The immense hostility of the rank and file had not in any way abated. This became evident when in April 1989, the BWIU called a mass meeting in Melbourne, the first in Victoria since 1973. The meeting was called to impose award restructuring, a euphemism for the multi-skilling of workers to drive up productivity and attack safety practices as demanded by the master builders. As a representative of the Socialist Labour League, I attended this mass meeting of 1,800 building workers. The BWIU leadership, including its Assistant National Secretary, Stan Sharkey, who was a leading Moscow line Stalinist, tried to speak, but he was met with the jeers and slow hand clapping from the audience. This only stopped when I got up and addressed the crowd and presented a motion rejecting the accord and award reconstructuring and advocating a socialist program. Sharkey tried to get his security thugs to remove me, but building workers stopped them and demanded my right to speak. Nobody spoke against my motion, which was passed overwhelmingly with 1,000 votes in favour. Against all those that claim that Australian workers do not have within them the capacity to fight for a socialist perspective, here was a meeting of nearly 2,000 building workers voting in favour of a revolutionary perspective aimed against capitalism. The same perspective contained in that vote is what is required today. There is no way forward for building workers or workers in any other section of industry under the dominance of the trade union bureaucracy. That is why workers must now form rank and file committees completely independent of all nationalist-based organisations. These committees are built by and democratically controlled by rank and file workers whose interests are in direct conflict with the companies, the politicians and the trade union apparatus. To end this comment, let me say again that I completely endorse the contributions by today's speakers and encourage all workers here or online to register their interests today in the establishment of a building workers rank and file committee.